In my opinion, team building is the hardest part of competitive Pokemon, and I'm willing to bet that it's the biggest weakness of 90% of players. I feel very glad to have found good success with a few of the teams that I've built myself, and today I will feature a few of my favorites and discuss 3 tips that I picked up on in my journey to improve as a team builder. I certainly don't claim to be perfect by any means, by the way. The first is this Booster Special Attack Walking Wake Sun team. The idea behind it is this. With Terra Water, Choice Specs, and Booster Special Attack, Walking Wake is going to be breaking pretty much everything that does not have an immunity. Therefore, I want to support it with hazard control so that it doesn't get worn down over the course of a game. If this happens and it gets too low, it'll be unable to take hits, it'll get revenge killed, maybe it'll have a hard time swapping in. So I prevented this with a Magic Bounce Hatterene and an Intimidate... What am I saying? So I prevented this with a Magic Bounce Hatterene and a Taunt Landorus Therian. Finally, to solve the problem of Slowking Galar pivoting in on Ninetales and using Chilly Reception to cancel my Sun, I put on a Low Kicks and a Scarf Raging Bolt in order to form a pivoting core. What I would do is double the Low Kicks into the Slowking Galar switching in, and then knock off. The Slowking Galar would switch out, and I would U-turn into it in order to keep the momentum going. The biggest thing that I learned from building this team is that you should always try to branch out and explore how some other teams may have solved the same problems that you're facing. I would never have realized that Low Kicks was an option if if I didn't run into this pivot spam team on ladder that kept destroying me. It featured Choice Specs Iron Crown, Choice Band Dragapult, and Choice Band Low Kicks. It just kept tearing it just kept tearing me apart. So eventually I was convinced to try the idea for myself, and I was rewarded quite handsomely in the end. I managed to peak 1967 ELO at rank 11 with this team, and it performed quite well into a lot of the Dark Spam Hyper offense and Sticky Web offense that was running around at the time. I do not recommend you play this team now. I hop on ladder with it every so often. It's fallen off pretty badly because of the rise of Tinglu stack and of some Ogerpon compositions. So it was good while it lasted. The next team that I'd like to discuss is a team built around Temper Flare Great Tusk. What I noticed about the meta at the time was that a lot of teams use Air Balloon Goldango in order to block Tusk's Rapid Spin. And so I figured, hey, why don't I just spin into it and then Temper Flare, right? Because that'll just immediately take off 80% and it'll make it a lot harder for Goldango to block my spin long term. This worked great, but of course I also ran into the problem of Sinistcha, who was a lot more common back then. And to solve that problem, I added a Zapdos, which finds entries on Sinistcha. I was running a fast Zapdos, so it actually got a lot of opportunities to chip and beat Pokemon that you might think conventionally beat it, such as Kyurem if it tries to switch in greedily. I noticed that this actually gave me a huge leg up on a lot of physical attackers because I could switch in Zapdos and I would often get a static paralysis. And if you get a static paralysis on a Zamazenta as it tries to body press you, or a Great Tusk as it tries to rapid spin itself, then that quite helps Pokemon like Kingambit, no? So in the rest of the team, I filled out a bunch of powerful threats that capitalize on the paras that land from Zapdos. The biggest thing that I learned from this team was to think more about your team than the amount that you play. And when you play, always have some purpose. So what do I mean by that? When I was building this team, I played more games than I'd like to admit. And I think that ultimately that kind of clouded my vision a little bit, because unless you're really holistically looking at all the data you're collecting from your battles, it's hard to keep a very clear head and look at the big picture, right? It's easy to get caught up in, oh, I just lost the game to this. Wait, so how do I beat that one threat? And you might not even consider how you misplayed, or how common that threat is, or whether or not it's even worth covering. Furthermore, when you play, always be trying to figure something out, at least when you're still working on a team. When you load up a battle, think, okay, I am going to try to figure out X, Y, Z. Or I suppose you can't always control the kind of matchup that you're getting, so always take notes and try to make some predictions before the battle starts. Hey, I think the way I built this team is this is how it's supposed to work, yeah? So let me load into this battle and I'll see what actually happens. And once I see that, okay, I'm going to make note of it and see if I need to change anything. I think if I had done that when I was building this team myself, I would have saved myself so much hassle and time. This is a Slowking team that I've been working on. And oh, actually, I suppose I have 4 tips. Oh, well, okay. I'll just sneak this one in here, right? When you're building a team, you kind of have to know what you want from the team, right? Do you want a team that can peak ladder? Do you want to build a team that you can just have a little fun with? Or do you want to build a team to practice a certain skill? How that relates to Slowking is, well, there's not too many reasons to use it over Galarian Slowking. Slowking is better than Glowking into Sun, because of its water typing. It's able to switch into Walking Wake a little better, but not by much, because Draco Meteor can still do a lot of damage to it. It's better into a lot of physical attackers because they can't come in so easily. It's better into Tinglu, and it is also better into Iron Moth. However, it's worse into Ogrefon Wellspring, it's worse into Raging Bolt, it's worse into Pecharunt. So I was not expecting too much from this team, right? And so I think with that in mind, it helped to kind of prevent myself from getting upset with certain losses or frustrations. Anyway, the idea behind this Slowking team, come on, is that because Slowking is better into Sun, I can keep up Hail a little bit more consistently. And I can also afford to run a fatter build, which historically Sun performs very well into. It also allows me to put a lot more pressure on hazard setters, because Slowking is less easily forced out by common stealth rockers like Landorus or Great Tusk. And so all of that culminates in being pretty much, or maybe not the perfect partner to Kyurem, but partnering perfectly with Kyurem. So I put on a Kyurem to the team, and I figured, well, hey, let's set up Kyurem a little bit more. Why not? So I put on a Meowscarada, keeps putting pressure on hazard setters, right, with its Choice Band Flower trick. And if there's a Corviknight on the other team, it attracts Corviknight in to, you know, try to get the Rocky Helmet damage to wall it. But surprise, bro, like I'm U-turning into my Kyurem, and now I'm in prime position to do a shit ton of damage to your team. The other stuff, the Tinglu, the Corviknight, the Zamazenta is just covering basic holes like speed, Darkrai, Raging Bolt, hazard removal, and King Gambit. You know, the standard Gen 9 OU package. The tip that I want to share with regards to this team is to think about team building in the context of how a game actually plays out. Because I think a common train of thought that I hear when people discuss team building is, oh, my team is weak to Moltres, so I will put on a... I guess to fit the replay here, a Tyranitar. I'm going to put a Tyranitar on the build. And the idea is obvious that, you know, rock beats fire. But you can't think about it like your opponent is an NPC. They're not going to keep their Moltres in on your Tyranitar. Obviously, that's an extreme example, but I think that a lot of mistakes in team building arise from not considering exactly how the decisions you make will play out in actual turns. So I would advise you, when you're building, to not just think about what sounds good, but what will actually work. What you've seen has sequences that lead to the outcomes you want. For instance, the thing that I talked about with Meowscarada, the U-turn, you might not think on paper that that's a way to set up Kyurem, just adding a Meowscarada, like, oh, what does Meowscarada do? It doesn't hit any of Kyurem's checks, but at the same time, you have to consider, oh, what switches does it force? What is my opponent hard pressed to do? Set hazards. So with that said, I think that's where I'll leave it off for today. I hope the tips in this video helped, and good luck with your own teams. Because team building is really hard, dude. It's so rewarding when you get your teams right, and it sucks so bad when they fall flat. But yeah. I hope you have a good day.